box whether I'm audible to you. Yeah, fine. Let's start. Of course, apparently, classification of fungi is not a new concept to you all, right? However, why we are doing it again? Yes, it is a part of syllabus. That is one thing, but when it comes to the theory material or the reading material shared with you in the last week, it is about 75 pages, right? So it includes actinomycetes, it includes fungi, it includes lichens, it includes mycorrhiza, it includes extremophiles, halophiles, extreme thermophiles, and so on. So it is very required to take a summary of whatever is shared and what extra is required in addition to that, right? So from that perspective, I have arranged these lectures. Let's look into the uh, classification of fungi. Fine. Now, as you all know, kingdom fungi we classify is at Oomycota and Eumycota. Under Oomycota, you have Phycomycetes, and they're further classified as Oomycetes and Zygomycetes, right? And further Eumycota, you have three groups, that is sac fungi, club fungi, and fungi imperfecti. So Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes, and Deuteromycetes. So Ascomycetes characterized by ascus, that is what is the sac-like structure, and the common examples are aspergillus that you have seen. Right. When it comes to deuteromycetes, most of them they produce different types of conidia and other forms of spores, and it is by asexual means they reproduce. So mycelia are septate and branched. So these kind of details you have already studied. So I have tried to take a overview of characteristic features of each group in a short paragraph here. I need not read that because it is known to you, right? So how do we classify the obligate parasites? How do we classify the saprophytes and type of mycelia, whether it is cynocytic or whether it is aseptate, isogamy, all these concepts you have learned. I have tried to summarize it in this slide. So this slide will give you the entire overview of the basics that you have done earlier. So basic classification that you have learned from N ninth standard to BSc also. So it is a overview slide for that. But in addition to this, we have to talk in details about the classification, which is what to write under that title is covered in the pages which are shared with you. So you will have to do one homework, that out of those 100 pages where you find fungi, pick up those pages and sort it out, saying those 3 4 pages for fungi classification. But what is not there in the books is about uh, uh, beyond morphological features for phylogeny or taxonomy that we have to discuss today, right? So it begins with this. uh, So, as we all know, there are millions of fungi expected species, but out of it, hardly 10% are characterized. So, this is a schematic representation, that is percentage of publicly available fungal genomes and their classification that has been done to taxonomic labels, right? So, these are the some common names which you know and are put under these taxonomic groups. So, Pizomycetes, Urotimycetes, like that. All right. So further classification when it comes to my sits. So you know kingdom, then order, all right. And then how we go for classifying till class, genera, and species. So the fungal genome at the class or higher taxonomic level is shared here. Taxa belonging to Ascomycete and Basidomycetes are illustrated in this particular figure. So the previous figure told you about total fungi classification into two groups, and then the Eumycota group further classified under Ascobasidomycetes and Deuteromycetes. And when it comes to fungal genome classification and higher taxonomic level classification, so taxa which belong to Asco and Basidomycetes are illustrated in this figure. All right. So it's really a science which is going to be talking about not morphological characterization and placing them in a particular order, class, or genome or genera, but it is much beyond that. what and how it goes, we have to learn. Now there are traditional approaches. What is a traditional approach? See the morphological features, how it grows in the media, how what are the aerial hyphae, what are there under the media, what kind of sporulation pattern, what is the colony character on specific media, so on and so forth, right? So macroscopic and microscopic uh, factors we consider when we go with traditional approach, which is majorly focusing the morphological features. So this has led to the subdivision of kingdom fungi into five different phyla: Ascomycet, Basidomycet, Mycophycophyta, Zygomycota, and Deuteromycota. So this is even the advanced level. In the first slide, we have seen there were only three groups. Now here you are seeing five groups, right? So conjugation fungi is an addition, and Mycophycophyta is another thing. Now when it comes to reliable diagnosis, may it be like saprophytic के साथ you have clinically important fungi also. And when it comes to classification of them, then just based on the basic things like morphological features, you won't be able to get to classify and identify the clinical specimen, right? So adoption of phylogenetic analysis in fungal identification and classification has improved. How has it improved? What are the things? Yes, laboratory determination of pathogen and diseases is done. So it has led us further advancement. Say, for example, one subkingdom and seven phyla, that is subkingdom, Daciara. It has got Ascomycota and Basidiomycota. Then you have Catridomycota, Glomeromycota. Like that, classification has expanded further, right? So this advancement happened in the year 2007. Now, these two subkingdom and five phyla system, what you have, in addition to that, you get one more phyla, that is Microsporidia, and that was added in the year 2015. Again in 2017, it had changed. You have 8 phyla, 12 subphyla, 46 classes, so on and so forth. So number is increasing as we go up with finding out new isolates, but at the same time, correct identification of already known species, genera, species, or isolates, I would say, is giving you this detailed classification. In short, simple morphological methods are not enough to find the taxonomic position of a fungi, right? Now, this is what is a traditional method when you talk about systematics of fungi. So morphological and phenotypic characters. So it is not a recent invention as such, but as you see in this slide, fungal systematic dates back to 17th century, when Antony van Leeuwenhoek invented microscope. Right, that from that point, people started working on fungi taxonomy. Yeah, right. Of course, as higher versions of microscopes they appeared, till the electron microscopy, more detailed structures were revealed, and taxonomy was even more rich. Right. So fungal systematics basically on physiological and biochemical characters. Now, when we say morphology, which is observable, or phenotypic characters, it is the basis for taxonomy, right? But some characters are unstable. You must have observed that Aspergillus growing on sabrot agar, Aspergillus growing on nutrient agar, Aspergillus growing on cloth, Aspergillus growing in soil, on potato, all they form different colors of spores also, even though the genus and species are same. The same isolate will behave differently on different media. So that is a limitation. So the characteristics are unstable and limited systematic information they will provide. All right. So you need to have more reliable characters which will help in fungal classification. So in 19th century, chemical stains were used to know the phenotypic characters of the organism. Now, chemical tests, which are called as spot test, is a standard identification protocol when it comes to say lichens. So, lichen is another component that is there in your syllabus, which is an association of fungi and algae, as you know. So, the staining methods, all right. Further, biochemical methods, as you have for bacteria, such biochemical methods came into use, and fungal systematics was even available to more details. What it includes? It includes growth temperature, right? Then dependent growth temperature dependent rate test, and nutrient utilization patterns, like you have glucose and fructose, different sugar utilization for bacteria. Similarly, here you have nutrient utilization text for fungi also. and they are used in classification of filamentous fungi as well as yeasts. Right. Then what you have is to get more details about these organisms, secondary metabolites also are studied. Like for example, in bacterial classification, you study for enzymes, right? Whether it is able to produce amylase or lipase or cellulase, etc. So these are metabolic parameters that you are studying. So secondary metabolites like pigments or antibiotics or antifungal and bacteriocins, whatever may be, that is another criteria which is used for systematic information about fungi. For example, chemotaxonomic characterization was used in systematics of penicillium. Other characters such as ubiquinone compounds, their particular fatty acid compounds, cell wall composition, protein patterns, isoenzymes, alloenzymes, all these are characterized. The last four lines of this particular slide, they tell you about all these parameters which are used for physiological and biochemical characteristic. So in addition to morphological and phenotypic character, you are relying more on how and what kind of molecules are produced by that organism, and is it a signatory molecule for that isolate. Specific composition, specific molecule under specific condition could be referred to as a signatory molecule. For example, as you know, lipid profiles are unique for bacteria. So similarly here for fungi and yeast also, to certain extent, lipid profile is one of the criteria that is applied when it comes to taxonomic characterization. Isoenzymes hai, alloenzymes hai, ubiquinone like compounds hai, pigments hai, so many things are there. So that is in addition to morphology based taxonomy, we are taking help of metabolite based or biochemical based characterization of the fungal isolates. Right. So this is one thing. Second is when you talk about morphology alone, what are the problems? Why should we go with biochemical estimation? So, as I told you earlier, the behavior of the same isolate may differ depending upon what nutritional condition, what environmental parameters it is growing under, right? So, spore producing structures formed as a result of asexual and sexual reproduction is the only way that is how the morphological characterization includes. So, what kind of colony is produced? Colony characters are written, the color of the spore is written, the arrangement of the spore, the design of the spore is analyzed under microscope. The septa and mycelia, they are analyzed under microscope, whether they are aseptate, whether they are sinusotic, that is multiple nucleus, whether there are septa present or septa absent, so on and so forth. So these are the simple basic criteria, but they may vary to certain extent. Of course, sinusotic nature won't vary, but spore color will surely vary, right? So you have certain limitations when you go with morphological approaches for fungal systematics, and you may consider it as a lower level classification when you are going only with the help of phenotypic characters and morphological features, right? You cannot really speciose the lineages of fungi to details. When you want to go with that, you have to take help of the methods like metabolite and secondary metabolite productions and pigments and biochemical characterization, right? When I'm talking about this, uh, isolating secondary metabolite, right? That is another challenge, in especially in case of organisms which are endosymbiont. So, or the organisms which do not sporulate in culture. So they are not providing any phenotypic character, and again it is a challenge to isolate the secondary metabolite from these organisms if they are growing as symbionts. So such challenges are there. Nature is not that easy to reveal upon, but yes, we are making some simple efforts and some tedious efforts to understand the beauty of nature and the traits and benefits out of it, right? So conodia spore, structure, shape, color, how it is, what color is formed on which kind of media, whether they are forming telomorphs or they are ascomata, all these terminologies you have learned. So you can go with different different morphological and phenotypic characters, but limitations occur at this particular point. Now, fungal phylogeny based on one or more few genes. Now you are seeing the chronology. We started from 1729. Then in 1855 we have started with physical and biochemical characters, and now in 1990s onwards, genetic basis of classification has taken a lead with the invention of instruments like PCR and sequencing tools. This is gaining impetus, right? So when it comes to PCR or single sequencing method, which was developed in the early 90s, molecular phylogeny, as it is applicable to bacteria, it has also helped to develop fungal systematics, and it is more powerful and reliable tool, right? So here, when it comes to the use of these genetic methods, initially the efforts were made with one or two genes, and based on those genes, classification was done. What was it? Let's see the commonly used locus or loci, that is part of genome, which is used in fungal phylogeny. As it is 16S rRNA sequences in bacteria, here it is 18S rRNA sequence, ribosomal RNA genes, that means rDNA, that is commonly used. So rDNA is a multi-copy gene that is easily isolated and cloned. Another thing is different regions of rDNA evolve at different rates, so making it a useful taxon dissolving lineage at different taxonomic levels. So conserved regions, that is what we talk, that is very important, and the rate which at which the variable regions they develop or evolve also is varying at each loci. So comparison is quite easy. So that's why 18S rRNA sequence or our DNA sequence, what it is called as, is very important. So in these regions, the internal transcribed spacers, right, ITS regions, that is one new term to you, or intergenic spacers, intergenic spacers, large subunit and small subunit of rDNA. So you know what is the large subunit of ribosome, what is the small subunit, and what is the rRNA present there. So rRNA present in the larger subunit is referred to as LSU, and which is present in the small subunit is referred to as SSU. And that genome sequence, the rDNA sequence, is very much of importance when it comes to fungal molecular phylogenetics. Right. So generally, when you talk about small subunit of ribosome and large subunit of rDNA from the ribosome, it is very much of importance when the efforts are made to delineate, that is to identify, to know the higher taxonomic level, right? And ITES regions, they are used for species or genus resolution. So high levels of species discrimination rate and PCR success rate, ITS of rDNA was assigned a universal fungal DNA barcode. Are you getting me? So what is we are talking about? We are talking about 18S rRNA region. The gene which encodes this is rDNA, right? So this rDNA, in the different parts of that. So what are the different parts? So whether it is obtained from small unit or large unit, so LSU or SSU for small. Then the intergenic spacers, you understand the term, right? So internal transcribed spacers, these are the regions which are of very much of concern when it comes to species level identification of fungal isolates. So that particular gene will be isolated, it will be amplified by PCR, and then you are going to sequence it, and that sequence is going to be blasted. That is, you are going to match it with the database available and try and find out the variations or similarities. All right, we will see the entire process at the end in the form of a flow chart. Now, when you are talking about DNA barcode, what is it is? What it is made up of? Yes, it is ITS of rDNA. That is what is DNA barcode for fungi. So, DNA barcoding is the use of short standardized segments of the genome, right? So, ITS regions are what? Short standardized segments of the genome present in the rDNA region. So they are going to give you accurate and rapid species identification. But the problem here also is that when you are going with data curation, there is a challenge with respect to identification of isolates. So large amount of erroneous sequences are present. Our sequences are there in the data bank also, public databases also. And if how these erroneous results are getting generated, one factor could be the PCR and the methodology, or if the personnels who are handling it are not skilled. That is one aspect of it. But when you're going in the nature, isolating a pure fungal isolate also is a challenge. And secondly, when there is a co-culture, thirdly, when they are symbionts or associative organisms, then you may not get the pure specific short standardized segment, and then it will lead to a wrong sequence, and the wrong database will get generated. Now, of course, don't we have any solution to these kind of errors and to curate these errors? Yes, they are there, and this problem is addressed by NCBI, right? National Depository. What you have is for fungal RefSeq, REFSEQ, reference sequences, RefSeq, curator, and these erroneous sequence data, they are curated using RefSeq curators, and they are cleaned and then they are available. Now, till now, we were talking about a particular sequence which is in the rDNA region, the ITS region, which is having very much of conserved sequences, or you're talking about something which is showing some variation. So, with the help of these comparing similarities or comparing the variation, you will get to know whether the two isolates are similar or are they differing, or your isolates you are studying its sequence is with you, and that sequence you are comparing with which is already there in the database. Right. So a specific region, that is ITS region in 18S rDNA region we were talking. Now, are there other genes which are involved in characterizing a particular isolate and finding its taxonomic position? So is 18S rRNA and ITS regions there is the only way? No, there are some other ways, some other genes which are involved, and we have to see the list of those. The single copy genes and housekeeping genes, right? Housekeeping, as you understand, it is required for daily activities and maintenance of the cell, right? So they are essentially expressed always. So when we are talking about use of genes in fungal taxonomy, rDNA is the one that we talked about, right? But in addition to that, single copy and housekeeping protein genes, they are there. They are many. They are doing lot many biological functions, and of course, in addition to that, when it comes to taxonomy, they provide effective markers to track organism evolution of the organism. Right. So they are very important ones. What are those? So certain genes like actin gene, ACT, then calmodulin, CAL is a short form used, or histones, H3 and H4 histones. Then you have GAPDH, that is glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme, or DNA replication licensing factor like MCM7, or RNA polymerase 2 last subunit of that, which is referred to as RPB1 or RPB2. Translocation of elongation factors, right? Translation process, translation, elongation, and termination of the chain that you have learned in genetics earlier or in biochemistry also. So translation elongation factor, that is TF1, that is another crucial component which is of use when it comes to taxonomy. So if you just summarize this slide, you have at least 8 to 10 different markers, which are the protein genes, housekeeping genes, or single copy genes, which are playing a key role in maintenance of the cell. At the same time, they are very important in fungal systematics. What are those? Let's revise. These are actin, calmodulin, histone, H3 and H4. Then you have glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase, that is GAPDH. Then you have DNA replication licensing factor, MCM7. Similarly, you have RNA polymerase 2 last subunit, RBP1, or second largest subunit, that is RBP2. Translation elongation factor, TEF1. Then cytochrome C oxidase 1, that is CO1, and mitochondrial ribosomes you have from that mitochondrial ribosome, large subunit and small subunit of rDNA, that is from mitochondria. That is why it is called as MT-LSU and MT-SSU. These are going to be very much of taxonomic importance. Right. So you have single gene sequences, or you have specific gene markers, or the proteins which are playing a role in cell survival, fungal cell survival, as well as they are characterizing the evolution phases, and divergence or convergence, relatedness of the species can be very well identified by studying the sequences of those genes. All right. So, when you are going to extract such data, you can assemble it in the form of phylogenetic tree that you have seen. Here, similarly, the fungal tree of life, AFTOL, this is a mega project that was done, and therein they had used LSU and SSU, large subunit and small subunit of rDNA, and various protein coding genes, including RPB1. Just now we talked about it. What is RPB1? RPB1 is RNA polymerase, large subunit gene. RPB1, RPB2, then MTSSU, that is mitochondrial subunits, ATP6. They were chosen and they were used to explore fungal phylogeny. The site is here mentioned for your referral. If you are interested, you can look at it in the free time. Right. So, in addition to single gene or a single protein which is having importance in phylogeny, multi-loci uh, phylogeny also is of importance. So, when you're talking about multi-loci, what are those multi-loci and how do they work? All right. So, when you're talking about the fungal genomes, which are studied by multilocus phylogenes, you have Cladosporia, you have Phoma alternaria, etc., which have been studied in details over the years in the last decade. But the first fungal genome that was studied using this approach was Saccharomyces cerevisiae as early as in 1996. All right. So, with the advancement of techniques, you have next generation sequencing tools that are available. So fungal genome also is explored using NGS technology, which is very rapid high throughput method. We know, we have studied in details, and the different platforms that are available, that is Roche 454, AB Solid, Illumina, HiSeq systems, all these we have discussed in details, right? So, in addition to Sanger sequencing method, all these tools are also available for genome analysis when it comes to fungal taxonomy. Of course, as we know, NGS technology is high throughput, rapid, efficient, and superior method. Massive parallel analysis that you can achieve using this. So large comparison of n number of isolates at a time parallelly can be achieved. So, when it comes to other ways or methods for fungal phylogeny or fungal taxonomy, these are the things that you have to talk about. Now, when I'm talking about taxonomic studies where DNA sequences are taken help of in addition to phenotypic features, yes, they are essential because exploring the taxonomy using phenotypic features is not foolproof, but at the same time, it is not the case that you just take the isolate, you go for its DNA isolation and go with NGS technology and you get the proper and correct phylogeny. No, you cannot rule out morphology and phenotypic characterization of the isolate. So it is equivocal, right? So equivocal matlab equal importance is there to both phenotypic characters as well as that are important, as good as they are important as that of DNA sequences, right? But generally what happens, people are eager to explore the molecular data and they rely more on it, but it could be uh, uh, misleading in certain cases, right? Improper delimitation sorry improper uh, distinction of species and taxonomic novelties cannot be identified. So some fungal sequences on existing databases have incorrect details. As we have talked earlier, it may be due to unskilled operators, or maybe system errors or specimen errors also. So you just cannot rely totally on genetic methods or genotypic methods for identification. However, you have to take help of both phenotypic, morphological, as well as genetic methods. So till now we have talked about one gene loci, multi-gene loci, the specific housekeeping proteins which are involved in classification as genetic tools for phylogeny of fungi or fungal phylogeny. Right now, ITS regions that we have talked about in details, let's take an overview of ITS regions, how they are important and why should we go for ITS. So ITS, as we talked, it is the internal transcript spacer region in the rDNA, right? So we have talked about it. It is called as barcode of that particular isolate. So internal transcript spacer region is the most frequently applied marker in evaluating the environmental DNA and phylogenetic placing of that isolate. Why ITS region? Because it contains many paralogous copies, paralogous, that is the term, paralogous copies, which allow amplification. And then you are going to go with sequence, right? Especially when the fungi are unculturable, then how you are going to purify and isolate, and how you are going to uh, 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 go for its colony formation and then isolating its DNA or rDNA, etc. So that time the ITS regions are going to be very important when you are extracting the DNA from the sample. Sample as an environmental sample from soil, from water, or any other environmental sample directly. So it is with reference to unculturable bacteria, fungi, or the eDNA that you are going to, E is to environmental DNA that you are extracting. So such time, uh, ITS region uh, is that each organism contains many paralogous copies, and then you will not land up with erroneous results. You will be able to tap all of them. Secondly, unique combination of conserved areas of DNA that we have talked in case of 16S rRNA also, or rDNA also in case of bacteria. Same applies here. That is unique combination of conserved areas. Similarly, they have unique combination of variable and hypervariable regions, which are very important when it comes to 16S rRNA or 18S rRNA. Whenever there is a point to be elaborated on 16S rRNA and 18S rRNA sequence with reference to phylogeny, you must mention about the conserved region, variable region, and hypervariable regions. You remember 1 to 9 regions in bacteria, we have talked to details. So similarly here, when it comes to fungi, this hypervariable DNA is going to be important because it is going to give uh, uh, what you say what you say, an opportunity to develop proper and robust primers which can be used for PCRs. So whatever DNA you are isolating, it is amplified and then sequenced, right? So it is very important to have precise primers. We have learned the importance of primers in the previous lectures. So that is feasible just because of these hypervariable or the very conserved regions in the in the ITS regions of rDNA. So that's why it is very important. Then ITS region was the first barcode commonly used in fungi. Why? These are the two reasons. That is, paralogous copies are there. Secondly, they are unique and they provide a good start point. That is, you can design robustly the primers. Right now, another thing is multiple copies of ITS regions are there, and they are in the cluster form within the genome, and they are generally homogenized by concerted evolution. Concerted evolution is not a definite phenomena, and mutations that are not homogenized can result in the formation of imperfect copies of functional genes. So we are talking about what is the importance of ITS region, right? So it is going to be the highly conserved region. It is not going to be a phenomena which is going to be caused because of mutations which are going to cause a variation, inherent variation. That is what we call evolution, as a result of evolution, these sequences are going to change, but it is not as simple as that a mutation happened and it got changed, right? So imperfect copies of functional genes and other intragenomic variation aberrations within the rDNA. So this is one concern when you are talking about use of ITS region. So intraspecific variation in ITS region is widespread even within the fungi. That's why you will be able to assign the particular genus species to the particular isolate based on interspecific variations. So here species level variation also is taken care of. Of course, there are certain times ambiguous results when you are analyzing the sequence, but yes, if there is the challenge to devise or design the perfect, what we say, the uh, perfect primers, right? So as we talked earlier, genomic methods also are not foolproof. You cannot entirely be dependent on those in taxonomy. Now, systematic sequencing efforts, yes, densely genome sequenced kingdoms of eukaryotes are there, and so examination of fungal genomes can give you better understanding of intergenomic variation, interspecific variation, and uh, phylogeny or taxonomy of the desired isolate can be done. So, what you have to do is you have to, okay, I shall go to this flow chart first so that it will summarize how we go on uh, uh, phylogeny analysis for fungi. So here you have a culture growing in your plate, which is a pure culture that is expected. You are going to extract the genomic DNA from the culture, right? Then you are going with PCR amplification, taking help of specific primers. So PURE tag ready, right? Pure tag ready, that is what is the word, to go PCR beads. So the different methods of PCR PCR is another technique which we have talked earlier also. So that is going to be used to amplify the sequences, right? Then these are the ITS regions. The detailed structure of these ITS regions we will see in the next slide. So they are selectively amplified. Then you are going to go with Sanger sequencing method to know what is the sequence of these particular ITS regions. Then you are going to go to the genome databases like EMBL is the one, or Google Kind CPI is there, which are going to provide you the database. The sequence that you have obtained, you are going to match here with the database. That is what is called as sequence blast search. So you are going to have international sequence databases like INSD, right? You are going to match the sequence of your isolate with whatever already is deposited in the database, and then with the help of RefSeq, etc. We talked about RefSeq. And it not only provides the blast analysis, it does not only provide the database, but it also provides the curators to remove the errors. So there are many facilities when it comes to these an international level sequence databases, and the depositories are concerned. Multiple functions they do. So EMBL, DOBJ, INSD, GeneBank, NCBI, RefSec, all these are the names of these national and international databases. So you are going to search the markers for phylogenetic analysis, and then what is the percent of similarity with that or deviation with that. Accordingly, you are going to place the isolate. You are going to do multiple sequence alignments, right? And any ambiguous regions, if they are there, then you are going to remove those and perform maximum analysis so that you get to know the actual relatedness between the isolate and the other already known fungi who are there in the database. So you can visualize the phylogenetic relationship, you can construct the phylogenetic tree, and of course at the same time you are going to compare data which is obtained from morphological and phenotypic characterization and biochemical characterization. So this is the chart that shows fungal identification using molecular phylogenetic analysis.